Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome back to Global Azure Live on Learn TV. This is day 2 of 3 of Global Azure, and all over the world, literally around the globe, there are lots of presentations being given right now, live streaming various topics. Could be from anywhere, could be from Africa, could be from Canada. It doesn't matter. There are so many to pick and choose from. I hope you join some of these streams and listen in and learn about Azure, because that is, after all, what it is all about. On this stream here today, we have 2 speakers with us. I'm going to start off with having a conversation with a good friend, and then later we will have a second session. I'm going to prop that up now. It's by Tim Huckabee. It's going to be about the ethical dilemma of AI, whether to save humanity or destroy it. That is going to be on in an hour. So instead, right now, we will have a nice conversation here with Dan Rosanova. Hello, Dan.
Hello, Magnus. How you doing?
I'm doing very, very well. Welcome to Global Azure on Learn TV.
Thank you for having me. Yeah,
well, definitely our pleasure. So we are going to talk about literally what you guys have done with Azure with your product. So officially the title of the session is Offering Enterprise-Grade Services in the Azure Marketplace. So you are, let's begin with you. You're Dan. Hello, Dan. You're head of product for Confluent Cloud. That's your official title?
Yes, that's correct.
And before that, let's start there, because I'm an MVP now. You were in days of yore, you were also an MVP, correct?
In the before, yes.
Yes.
Before now, I worked in Azure, and then before that, I was an MVP.
Exactly.
For many years, actually.
Yeah, so you were an MVP, and then you joined Microsoft, and you started working with messaging with Microsoft. And so give us a background. What were you doing with Microsoft?
Yeah, so I did get into the messaging space in Microsoft, and messaging is what most of my career has been in. If you go far enough back, I did a lot of BizTalk in the past, and then other messaging things even before that, like IBM's and Tibco's messaging stuff. And so I thought the cloud in general was just exciting, because a lot of the things that make messaging so hard are just setting it up and getting started with it. And then that kind of drew me closer and closer to the same direction, which ultimately brought me to Confluent, which is about kind of moving past the original ideas of messaging and into streaming and real-time data in a more flexible and easy-to-use way, which then brought me back to Azure, because Confluent runs as a SaaS messaging service, so there's no infrastructure to manage, runs in all 3 clouds, but that means that you have to get started on them. And we had an opportunity a few years ago, actually, to be early into Azure's Marketplace for SaaS solutions. So rather than, most of the cloud providers have had marketplaces for like VM images for a long time. That's a pretty established business.
Oh, yeah.
But it was fairly new for, then you just you spin up a VM type with that image, and that's kind of the way that transaction works.
Yeah.
But you're ultimately still running VMs, and the cloud is great, but like if you're just running VMs, you're still running machines, so you're still doing a lot of toil, a lot of work. And this exciting kind of opportunity to do a SaaS service through Azure, even though we already had an Azure service, gave us an opportunity for people to find our service very easily, for people to sign right up through it, through their Azure account, and use it immediately. And it's been quite a journey, and there's a lot of parts for us to talk about, but it's been a really exciting opportunity and a really exciting outcome that has led us to Azure was actually the last cloud that we put our service on for reasons that predate my time. I can say that I made it a high priority as soon as I got to Confluent, but it's now the one we have the deepest integration with.
Well, maybe that was why they brought you on board. I don't know.
There were many jokes about that along the way, both at Microsoft and in my company.
I can only imagine, yes. Okay, great. Well, so let's start from the kind of beginning. I don't need to go through the whole what is Confluent in detail, but higher level for those who do not know. What is the service?
Yeah, the service is all built around Apache Kafka. Apache Kafka is one of the most successful Apache projects. It has we believe about a 70% adoption rate among the Fortune 500. So
Wow.
not all Apache projects get picked up by big corporations, and being picked up by big corporations isn't the only sign of success, right? There's many, but it is a telling sign, because not many have had that level of adoption. And Apache Kafka is a great software package, but like a lot of open source, it's got some rough edges. You have to run it. I think the popular phrase I learned at Microsoft was that it's free like a puppy, not free like a beer. And so I think it was Josh Holmes is the first person.
You have to care about it and take care of it and do
yes,
things.
You have to nurture it and grow it. Yes, and you cry when it poops on the rug, and all sorts of worry and problems. It's designed to work. It's not, it's designed to work in a variety of places because it's open source software. So making it to really work in the cloud is one thing. Making it to really work as a first, like a native service, as something that feels natural to an Azure user, is a totally other thing. But really fundamentally what Kafka is about is it's a append log pub sub type system. You produce and you consume messages, and you decouple producers from consumers. And unlike a queue where you put messages in and they get read and they go away, it is a log, so it's immutable. The messages don't go away. It's a checkpoint, so you can multi-read, non-destructive read, things like that.
And so you would put something like this, obviously, in your architecture to send messages between various points. And
absolutely, it's actually really popular. Kafka in general is really popular as a microservices coordination mechanism, which I didn't understand at first. I actually, from my messaging background, was like, this is stupid. Like, this doesn't make sense. And there's kind of two takeaways I took from that. One is that, one, you never argue with the market, right? It's like yelling at the rain. People are going to do what people are going to do. But as I realized the broader context, it's that most microservices are running in something like Kubernetes these days. So they themselves are kind of inherently stateless. And there's not one service. It's instances of service. It's pods of service. And to really stay kind of microservices true to that architecture, they don't want to call out to other services for their state. So, naively, past Dan thought, okay, well, just like post a message and then the microservice gets the update. But what it really comes down to is each instance of the microservice needs an update, and you don't know how many there will be. And they'll come and go, and they might need yesterday's messages and all sorts of things. And it actually turns out that Kafka is a pretty good mechanism for distributing state between microservices, which is kind of why I think Kafka, now people do a ton of other stuff with it too, but that's kind of why software engineers, like developers, really, I think, are pushing on Kafka or using it a lot. But those people want to use it, they don't want to run it, which is a little bit different.
And now we got a visitor.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, that's fine. It's wonderful. So, all right. And when we talk about, you were kind of hinting towards it just a little bit now. You have implemented this as a service on Azure, which means that if I may ask, kind of under the covers question, you yourselves are then using Azure infrastructure to run this service. What can you tell us about that? What kind of services do you depend on in Azure? If Azure storage goes down, is your service okay?
Absolutely. This is a great question. So we use a lot of different internal Azure services, and they're going to be a lot of the same ones that anyone on Azure uses. For our compute layer, we're using AKS. We've been in the cloud long enough. Our cloud is 4 or 5 years old now, that we predate most of the Kubernetes services. So we actually ran our own Kubernetes in the cloud on a different cloud provider a while ago. Yes, that was not that's beneficial to us. Yeah, we don't do that anymore. We use a Kubernetes service from each of the cloud providers. So we're sitting on top of AKS. Since there is state inside of Kafka, that's its whole value proposition. We use a variety of different storage. So some is going to be disk-based storage. Some is going to be object-based storage. And that is a lot of the kind of things we had to change with Kafka to make it really more cloud native. Is just loading up a VM with a bunch of disks isn't really cloud native.
It's not cloud native.
Yeah. So decoupling the storage and compute at a real fundamental level was something we spent a lot of time on. So the kind of answer to your query, if Azure storage goes down, like if disks or if blob storage is down, our service will still work because it's using a different type of storage for short-term storage. But if you're storing a petabyte of data, and you can, that you won't be able to get the whole petabyte if blob storage in that region is down.
Right.
But you'll be able to write new and read new. Yeah.
Good. Yeah, that's the interesting part here. I think that to do something cloud natively without using, under the cover it's a VM anyway, right? You as a consumer buy it as a service, but yeah, we're still running our software on a VM. I mean, how is that cloud? It's not.
Exactly, and I think the cloud native thing extends beyond that, even to how you purchase and acquire and get started with services.
Right.
To exactly that. If I'm showing you a VM, that's obviously not like we tried to target being software as a service versus platform as a service or infrastructure as a service.
Yeah.
If I'm showing you a VM, that's not really software as a service.
No.
If you're having to manage it, it's definitely not. And even if I'm managing it, it's really not. So we're really trying to up level across the stack, including how you find and get started, which is kind of like what the most exciting stuff in the Azure Marketplace for us has been.
Right. So I don't know how, maybe you know from your time at Microsoft, but there are a couple of other services in the cloud that are offered this way. Like, for example, Microsoft adopted, because the whole industry said, we're going to have Redis cache. Microsoft tried to make, 3 or 4 different cache implementations, and none of them really stuck because the market still kept saying, hey, we want Redis cache. So then, finally Microsoft said, okay, fine, we'll give you Redis cache as a service. So you're saying, is your offering similar to that? I don't know how they implement Redis cache, by the way. But.
Yeah, I'd say fairly similar. There's a whole slew of us in our space. Databricks, Snowflake, Redis, Elastic. That people want that thing because, so for instance, there's no one in the world with more experience with Kafka than the people at Confluent. Confluent was started by the people who founded Kafka.
Right.
And then the other kind of so exactly, and this was I think a very insightful move by Microsoft, is to say, rather than we'll have a Me Too service, we'll have some services that we do ourselves, but we'll have others that we invite partners in to do. What's interesting is all of the ones in our cohort, they're not really direct head-to-head competitors with Azure services, especially because as we exist on this kind of SaaS level rather than a PaaS. Like, Microsoft's pretty focused on IaaS and PaaS, and they're pretty good at it in Azure. And so if you're an Azure person, those are great tools. But kind of the higher level up that you get from that, if you're a Kafka person or an open source developer who has to deal with Kafka, there's going to be some learning curve to those services, whereas something like Redis as a service is going to be more natural to you, or Kafka as a service. And the kind of higher level abstraction just makes it easier to work with. It
just makes it easier, yeah, because you were saying that people wants that, and let's qualify people. People are people that want to consume, that are technical people that want to consume this service. They want the features of this service. They want to send a bunch of messages, right? To oversimplify. That's what they want. What they don't need to do, or need to have to do, is manage a cluster of servers, and do backups of them and maintain them and do all kinds of things. Technically, they could do that. They could take Apache Kafka, run up a bunch of VMs, deploy it, install the whole thing and run it, and then maintain it themselves. No one's preventing you from doing that. Go ahead, right?
Absolutely. I mean, you and I could get together next week and build a car together.
Yeah, exactly.
We could.
We could.
I don't know if I'd drive that anywhere, but yeah.
It doesn't mean it's a good idea. And that's exactly the point, right? Where if we were to manage somehow to build a car, or set up Apache Kafka, and then we'd ask some other people to do the same, and some other people to do the same. In the end, hopefully, for those of us that succeeded roughly, we'd have solutions that look kind of similar. And so then exactly what you are doing and what is being done when these higher level services kind of come about is that you just make one implementation that works with the cloud nativity. You can acquire it as a service. You can self-onboard yourself and run it, and then it just works, and you don't have to worry about how it works as the consumer. It doesn't matter to you.
Yeah, exactly. We actually try to abstract away all the infrastructure details so that people don't have to worry about them or think about them. Like, you never have to think about how much disk space do I have on my brokers. Like, that's not a thing we want you to have to think about. And we've spent a lot of effort to build an abstraction that's consistent across cloud providers. Yep. Just because I know, so for me personally, back when I was in Azure, I heard people talk about multi-cloud, and I thought they were crazy. I was like, you're never going to run the same application on two different cloud providers. And I think that's largely, I mean, if you're not talking about something like Kafka then, or infrastructure application, then that's probably largely true. But what I've seen in the last like 5 years is that a lot of companies are multi-cloud. And there's two kind of drivers for it. One is they run like best of breed things in different clouds. And then the other is happenstance. Like mergers and acquisitions cause people to buy a subsidiary that runs on AWS. And there's not a lot of business benefit to moving, like a team of people that knows Azure or AWS is not fully fungible. You know, it's like I thought it would be easier to be multi-cloud. I moved to a place where I am, and it's not like twice as hard. It's like 10 times as hard. So everything works differently. And so it doesn't really pay to make like a AWS or a Google based subsidiary transition its infrastructure as a service to Azure. If you're going to keep it for a long time, it might. But so what ends up happening is through M&A, and then kind of through just, hey, this vendor's product only runs on that cloud, which not everyone is multi-cloud. People end up with lots of cloud footprint. And so we wanted to give, since we're kind of a connectivity, data mesh sort of fabric thing, we wanted to give people a consistent experience across cloud providers. Conveniently, that, I mean, I had a lot of hand involved in that. So we made it in a way that was, I think, feels very natural to Azure users. It maybe feels a little less natural to Amazon users at first, but it is consistent across all. So you won't even really know which one you're using other than kind of how you got into it, I guess.
And that's pretty cool, because you don't actually at all have a stake in how much Azure is being consumed. You only care about how much people are consuming your service. So if someone were to actually migrate an application from one cloud to another and continue using your service on the other cloud, it's no skin off your back. It's the same.
That's true. And what I would say, though, is that I don't see a lot of people migrate other than from on-prem to cloud. I see that happen a lot. Yes. But what I do see is us used as a conduit between clouds, because this is the funniest part for like all of the kind of native service, all of the first-party services in each of the cloud providers. Well, okay, I have this subsidiary running on AWS. How do I use that? You don't, Cosmos DB doesn't run in AWS. So you need some sort of bridge to do that. And we get used a lot in that space. And since we have an actual legitimate, like on-prem, we actually started on-prem. Our CEO realized that it would take so long to get a cloud up and running that we couldn't wait as a company. So we've shipped our first thing not in the cloud. But that's actually given us an ability to say, okay, we have a very good non-cloud thing. It's linkable to our cloud thing. And then our different cloud things are linkable to each other. So it's better to be lucky than good sometimes. And I don't know which one that was, but like we ended up in a good place. So
yeah, definitely. And that really helps. I assume your customers to interconnect things, that you are just there in all of the relevant places, and then they can choose to use your service if they want to talk across those bubbles that are the different clouds and on-prem.
And then we actually spend a lot of effort to integrate to the services within each of the clouds. So we have in the Apache Kafka world, there's this concept of connectors. It's a connector framework. It's like on and off ramps for Kafka, because not everything speaks Kafka. So there's hundreds of connectors out there for different software and SaaS products. And we built connectors for most of the Azure core services. So if you want to get right from Apache Kafka into Cosmos DB, that's like a point and click thing, or into SQL Server. Or if you want to pull SQL Server CDC logs and turn them into a stream and then do processing on them and split them and send some to Cosmos and some to blob storage and some somewhere else, that all works. Or if you want to take data off of an event hub and put it into Kafka for people who want to push it to, maybe you have event hub data and people want to process it in AWS. That's something that we spend a lot of time making sure that we're a good kind of interlock with the native services of each of the cloud providers.
Yeah.
And that's probably the most developed in Azure because like AAD is something that's not an option with Azure, but it also, I can say with a lot of multi-cloud experience now, pretty much everyone uses it. Even people running on AWS, even enterprises running on AWS are using AAD for identity. And even people who don't really like Microsoft begrudgingly admit to me that AAD is like the best identity solution in the world. And for us, we have native AAD integration through the marketplace. If we didn't in the past. That's what the marketplace gave us most recently. Was now, if you go to Confluent's marketplace offering and you sign up, like there's no more user creation. There's no setting a password. It's using your AAD credential to flow right into our product experience. The billing is integrated with your Azure account. So it's billing to your Azure account, not to us. So no payment method, no identity management. You're managing your identities through AAD. It's a pretty fluid experience and really easy.
Yeah. I can imagine that. That sounds really cool. I was thinking about now we have Confluent and it's running in Azure as a service. You can use it. So let's then start talking about how to get it, because this session was pegged as talking about the marketplace and various things, right? So let's pivot to that. You have chosen to, I guess, or I don't know if that was much of a choice to you. Maybe that was handed to you by Microsoft saying, hey, you shall be in the marketplace. But you are in the marketplace. You're in the Azure Marketplace. So someone who wants to get your service picks it up on the marketplace, right?
Yeah, and actually you can type in Confluent within the Azure portal and our service, our marketplace offering shows up there and you can create it right from there.
That's true. It does in the search box, or you can just find the service through there. Okay. And so tell us about that kind of a journey. Was it difficult to put the service on the marketplace, and are there many hoops to jump through?
So no, it wasn't actually difficult, except that the marketplaces have evolved in the time we've been using it. So in a few years ago, the idea of the SaaS service thing, we were eager to be one of the first to jump on that wave into Azure's marketplace. But Azure's marketplace capabilities have expanded a lot in that time. But that's kind of meant that then we had like legacy marketplace contracts and new marketplace contracts. So there's all this versioning and all this stuff that goes on in the background. The core integration itself, it's a small team for us. And it's the same team actually that does the marketplaces for all three cloud providers. But we've had, I'd say, the best partnership from Azure, from their side on the marketplace, and which was strengthened then by a strategic partnership we signed last quarter with Microsoft that is part the marketplace stuff, part other stuff, part go-to-market type stuff, and which I think is the result of our success in the marketplace. It's like Microsoft's a little picky about who they necessarily want to partner with. You know, it's like you and I couldn't just start a company tomorrow and show up, and Microsoft's gonna be like, "Yeah, come on, we'll give you everything you want." Oh, you might be able to. I don't know if I'd get that greedy, but Microsoft is very metrics driven, so they're very aware of success. And so when they saw how well we were doing, they invited us to be even closer partners. And now, I mean, there's a weekly sync between my engineering team that does marketplace and our Microsoft team, and anything like, hey, yes, we occasionally have challenges or problems, or what the biggest problems tend to be is people want to transact in new and different ways. And so then we have to think, okay, how are we going to build this thing so it's seamless to our customers? And it's a teamwork cooperation thing, but it works really well. And then the big kind of benefits of it are mutual to us because, like I said, you can just find the product and try it and use it, and you're just paying for what you use. You can also do more kind of exotic purchase contract stuff that's like an enterprise agreement, which you wouldn't really necessarily, I wouldn't do if I was kicking the tires on something. It's like how one business buys from another. But the contracting approach from the marketplace is really cool because it's pretty much blessed fixed legal language that all the providers like us use. And it just makes it a lot easier to get through a purchasing thing. That's one thing I took for granted working in Microsoft was how much work and back and forth and difficulty there is in the legal aspects of buying software and services for most companies. And so anything that streamlines that is a net benefit, I think, both for the provider and for the consumer. So
you're saying as a marketplace owner, Microsoft is making your life easier than helping you out? Yeah, it's making it a ton easier. And one, on the legal thing, that's for sure. The discoverability thing is huge as well. I used to know the number when I worked in Azure, but there's a lot of eyes looking at the Azure portal every day. I mean, and some of them now see us. And then it also helps because people sign very large agreements with Microsoft. So there's a large captive pool of prepaid, usually revenue or contracted dollars that they're going to spend. And since it's pretty much everyone's whole cloud running on Azure, that's a big amount. And then when they want a little bit of Kafka, it's a rounding error, and they can just dip into that to be like, okay, well, this draws from my enterprise agreement. There's no new legal framework that we have to get into or transactional framework for exchanging money. And so that actually works really well too. So this has been a huge benefit for us. That's really good to know, because that is you're not small by any means. You're pretty big. Maybe small by comparison to Microsoft still, but you're pretty big. So if someone starts smaller, and I guess the thing would be that, we built our software and now we have a VM for that, and we can surface that image in the marketplace, like you alluded to before. Like there's tons of those, lots and lots and lots of those companies that built some software somewhere and now they're offering it. For any such company, small company maybe starting up, it would be beneficial to be in the marketplace, you're saying? Absolutely. Especially if I was going to target like what would traditionally have been called enterprise customers, so kind of business customers, I'd probably go marketplace first. Yeah, because you don't have to have your own agreement or contract or deal with this customer, because that's just really messy. Yeah, I don't know if you could go forever just marketplace, but you could certainly do it first and get started a lot easier with a lot less pain, and find if you have product market fit earlier and figure out, is this worth doing more of? Especially because I cannot say enough about how much of the challenge it takes away from the, hey, how are you going to pay me? Oh, you want to give me a credit card? No one wants to give you a credit card, right? Especially a lot of companies, people don't. I actually worked at Confluent almost 3 years. I don't have a company credit card. So I can't give you a company credit card. I'd have to use my personal one. And so it just makes a lot of it simple, very simple. Of course. And for you guys, has the marketplace kind of opened up any other additional commercial opportunities, or it's more like the transaction piece, or is there any other commercial opportunity that you have received from being in the marketplace? Yeah, there are. And then I think so. The commercial opportunities are what are kind of the flexible transactional terms that the marketplace is giving us. Some of the non-commercial stuff has been some of the most interesting stuff, to be quite honest. Like we are in a small group of people that actually has a resource provider in Azure. So if everything in Azure has a resource provider. Microsoft.storage, Microsoft.web, Microsoft.service bus. There is a Microsoft.confluent resource provider. And so if you do the AZ show, AZ RP show, you can see the resource providers. And
That works only really because we did this because of the marketplace. And it's actually Azure's marketplace team pushed us to do this, which I'm very happy about. Because of that marketplace experience and the integrated AAD experience, now we have a resource provider that's also integrated, because I did not appreciate, coming from Azure, I didn't appreciate how, I mean, I took for granted Resource Manager and like how Azure's Resource Manager works. The other clouds don't have that. So like in AWS in particular, like you don't have that. So it's a bunch of, like, you pretty much need to use Terraform or something like Terraform. And we have a Terraform provider, but it also is a lot more native and comfortable, I think, to a lot of people to just say, well, I'm going to use the thing that Azure uses, which is the Resource Manager. So the commercials are cool. The non-commercials are really cool. The identity integration to me is just amazing, because like back to how powerful AAD is. If you grant a user access to our product, you can actually go into Azure Active Directory and put IP restrictions on where that user can be when they get their token for logging into us. So, and it's like, oh, well, now Magnus can't log into Confluent Cloud unless he's in his home country. And like, we got that for free. Like we didn't, I mean, I guess it's not free. We had to do some identity integration, but it's identity integration with the biggest identity provider in the world. So boohoo. But like, we don't have to build that capability into our service now. We just get it from AAD, and people want to manage that stuff in a central way anyway. Just like people actually, back to the commercials, want to manage their bills in a central way. Like they don't, it's kind of funny. The same, there's some shared mindsets, like the same mindset the commercial people have that we probably interact as tech people, we probably interact with the least, are actually quite similar to the same mindsets that security people have, which we interact with more, which actually get similar to how tech people are. Is I want my stuff in some place where I can understand and manage it all. And my stuff changes. For the accountants, it's the bills. For the security people, it's the access controls. And for, engineers and stuff, it's the bits. So it's the same mindset. It's just shifted, and being through the marketplace has helped us hit all three of those really well and meet customers where they are.
Perfect. And then that you transitioned so nicely into the resource provider, because that's literally the next thing I wanted to talk about. First of all, let's zoom out just briefly for people who do not even know what you're talking about right now. You go, well, a lot of people go into, they maybe use PowerShell to create instances of resources in Azure, or maybe they use the Azure portal even to do so. But under the covers, if you want to create anything in the cloud, in Azure Cloud at all, you have to go through the resource management endpoint. That's the one thing that everybody must do. And so when you're creating a VM or a storage account or an instance of your service, doesn't matter, it still goes through that point, right? Go ahead.
Absolutely. And this is, I do. So I actually started in Azure before this whole thing existed.
Yes.
And it was a really advanced idea and a bold idea, because it's not how the other cloud providers work. And before this, before the portal we know and love now in Azure, the previous, I'll just say stuff that was there. There was no central entry point for management. That's right. It was kind of a hodgepodge. And years ago, Microsoft, long ago on land far away, it's actually like 30 miles that way, but from out my window, but like maybe 2013, 2014, Microsoft decided to change that, decided, hey, we need a better model for this. And they created that model that still exists today and is the center for how everything is deployed within Azure, which is ultimately a eventual consistency workflow. So
So if your business is to sell your software that you built running on an EM in Azure in the marketplace, then you don't need to have your own resource provider, because you'll be using the VM resource provider that Microsoft built. And then you'll install your software on that VM image, and people will consume that and give you money. However, you guys went further, right? You went all the way. You created your own resource provider. So you have yours. So tell us, more about that, because what does it mean to have a resource provider to a company? Why would one have one?
Yeah, the kind of big advantages it's given us, other than forcing that identity integration I talked about, and the kind of explorability and ability to just look in the portal and create a Confluent organization, is that it also then gives us a presence within the Azure portal. So if you create a Confluent organization in the Azure portal,
Yeah.
you'll see it there in the resource group that you chose to create it in.
Yeah.
Just like any other service.
Any other resource, yeah.
Yes, and you can see it, you can manage some of it. We're still building out the management pieces, but that's actually a kind of a block. That's a delay on our side, not a delay on Microsoft's side. They've been very patient with us for that. It's our first time doing this. So it's a lot of kind of new stuff for us from an identity flow standpoint and from a what is this going to look like? And so today, when you go into that portal, you'll see that part of the Azure portal, I should say. You'll see some basic data about your Confluent organization, and then you'll see a link to go into our UI. But what we're building out is kind of a deeper integration than that. And like our UI will always be more specialized for what we do, which is data in motion. It's a very, there's 200 services in Azure. We're only like 6. We're the just the things that focus on data in motion. But we design them all to work very closely together. So you'll always be able to do management through the Azure portal. But there's going to be some kind of shiny, cool data tracing things that won't surface in the Azure portal. You'll have to come into our portal or use a direct API from us if you want the graph for them. But from kind of an operator standpoint, you can do all the things without coming to our portal, without leaving Azure.
Yeah, and that's pretty cool. And so the Azure Management Endpoint is an HTTP REST-based API. And this is the thing that you mentioned that you put your own access control on. So all the actions, all the REST-based actions you could make on your service, they go through that endpoint, and those you can put access control on to allow your users fine-grained control of who can do what with which. That's your point.
Absolutely, and actually, this is an interesting one because what my experience tells me that the Microsoft users are probably because AAD is used for so many things beyond Azure that the Azure users, yeah, exactly. If you're using Office, you're using it. The Azure users tend to be the most aware of the things they can control and restrict through AAD. So you can prevent people from purchasing, from creating a marketplace resource through AAD. That's off by default, but a lot of people know or think to turn it on by default globally. And then the same controls can extend down, to individual operations on the resource provider through RBAC in Azure. And so, you can say, hey, Dan cannot create marketplace organizations at all. Magnus can create Confluent Cloud Marketplace, but he can't create Elastic Marketplace. So like there's a lot of controls there. In the other cloud providers, people are kind of less sophisticated with some of this stuff, so it's kind of always open all the time. But in Azure, if you go to create our product and our service, and something seems to go wrong right when you're creating it there, it's probably because someone has locked down access, which is, talk to them about it. It's someone in your organization. Their errors tend to be fairly clear. They used to not be clear. And that's something we worked with Microsoft on, is the surfacing that, hey, you don't have the permissions to ultimately purchase this thing, because you're kind of purchasing something, and it's the same as spinning up like a database instance. Well, you're purchasing something when you do that. I mean, you're going to be paying for it while it's running, but it's a good you can control that through the resource manager as well. So that's like a big advantage that I think Azure has, especially. No, I'm not going to say that statement. I don't want to make enemies with another cloud provider. So
no, that's fine. Let's not go there. But I do love also the resource provider model. I believe that the former model was more like, I think it was more called Azure Service Model, or maybe that was something they invented after the fact. But when they created a new one, Azure Resource Model Manager, so Azure Resource Manager, ARM, right? The ARM model. That's when they started building these resource providers, so that that then extends to kind of infinity and beyond, right? You could write any number of resource providers for the platform.
Yeah, and so amazingly, and hopefully I'm not upsetting any of the people at Microsoft when I say this, amazingly, like they designed Resource Manager to do this like a decade ago. It was always designed from the beginning to have external parties have resource managers. It just took a long time to kind of get the business and everything else together.
Well, look at you now. Right? Here's Confluent doing their thing in Azure as a service, and Marketplace and everything kind of, well, just works maybe is a stretch, but but I mean,
it works a lot easier since there was a place for it to slot into, and I think it reflects a lot of Azure's been really good about looking down the road and seeing, well, what's not just, it's very tempting for all of us in kind of the modern kind of tech business to look 3 months, 6 months, 12 months down the road. To look 5 or 10 years down the road in the tech industry is really hard. And this is a place, I think it's funny because the things that provider creates, like the stuff behind the scenes, people complain about because it's very verbose. Like if you ever export the ARM template for the stuff you built in Azure, people don't really like that, but the thing works well and is designed well. Just because the human interface isn't so good, I'm not as concerned about. But like, there's other things that have made the human interface better, but the technical capability, the technical interface is fantastic.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. So you now refer to the ARM template. That's the payload, the body of the request that you make to the resource to the endpoint, right? So you send a little description of what would you like your service to be like or look like, and that payload, that body, is the ARM template. So again, everybody who wants to talk to Azure managed resources in Azure have to go this route. Even you have a provider for your service in Terraform. So one could use Terraform to deploy your service in Azure, or consume it, or instantiate it, and manage it for that matter. And the same then with you can also do it with writing an ARM template, or use the newer version of that, the domain specific language, the bicep version of that. It doesn't matter which. You can use all these, and you have command line versions as well, PowerShell and stuff.
Yeah, so that's kind of the resource manager model in Microsoft drives such goodness that it's the unsung hero of the Azure cloud, in my opinion. I should have thanked these people when I still worked there. That everything you see in the portal is a resource manager. It is a resource manager. Everything you see through the CLI and the PowerShell is also and the Terraform is also the same thing from that resource manager. And basically what that is there's an HTTP spec with a Swagger, and then all of those things, I mean, not the portal, but the other things are auto-gen from it. And there's a lot of work to polish the rough edges of auto-gen code, but like, a lot of it's done for free because it's going from Swagger into the CLI, and it's a consistent experience for all. And that consistency, I think, is what's amazing. And Azure has been very good with is there's nothing in the portal you can't do through CLI, and there's nothing in the CLI you can't do through PowerShell, and there's nothing in PowerShell you can't do through Terraform. So it's a really consistent experience, no matter how you choose to interact with it. And I think Microsoft was the leader of that concept in all of the cloud.
I would definitely agree. I mean, if you wanted to, you can it's always completely possible to drop down to actually making an HTTP request with a REST-based, request to an HTTP endpoint, and put slap an authentication token on there that you have previously had to go and fetch from the AD, and then craft your own body of the message there to make sure that it follows the expected input to the cloud. You can do that manually if you wanted to. Drop all the way down and do it that way. But of course, what we are looking for is much higher level experiences here, right? Yeah,
I mean, people used to write assembler code, right? Yeah. So, and you don't do that anymore. You use higher level languages, and they're getting higher level all the time. So yes, well, it's all there. And assembler code is still there. Every modern language we write in, you can read the assembler for, but like you generally don't want to do that anymore. So you want to use the right modality for your persona, the right modality for how you like to work.
So who would build a resource provider? Who's a good target? Like if you have a service, if you're doing so, if you're not what's your advice? Who would be doing this? What's the telltale signs of, we might need a resource provider?
Yeah, I would first and foremost make sure that you're going to be successful on Azure. You can be in the marketplace without a resource provider. You kind of have to be invited to make the resource provider with Microsoft. So you can still do a SaaS service without a resource provider. And for some, like if it's like like a human focused service, not a machine focused service, then you probably don't even need a resource provider. Like if it's a travel booking service you're going to make with a UI, you might not need one. So I'd start that way. Who would do it? Generally speaking, I think it's going to be SaaS or PaaS providers who want to run something on top of Azure. And again, that's not going to be your first foray into your product. Most people aren't well funded enough to start at step 7. You gotta start at step 1 and work your way up. And when you get there, and when you've established product market fit and you feel good about this, and Microsoft feels good about this, then it's a good thing to look into.
Right.
But we started actually with the VM model years ago, and actually had a lot of success with that. But this just kind of fits since we're a SaaS service, the resource provider model and the deeply integrated model fits us well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so starting from like step 1, have a great idea, right? And then build some software and start getting customers to actually buy your thing. And is it any good? Now you're ready to maybe offer it to a lot of people on a marketplace where people can just acquire it from you with much more automation, and that would be an Azure Marketplace play then.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And get your experience down, get going, and start doing the thing, and then as you get gradually more involved and your relationship with Microsoft matures, and maybe if you are, like you're saying, offering a PaaS or a SaaS thing that some other company would use to build something further, then you can consider making a resource provider full on, like you have done.
Yeah, I'd say, the marketplace and all of the partnership and help from Microsoft isn't going to help a bad product succeed. It's going to help a good product succeed more. So at the beginning, you really have to start at the beginning. And that's, to me, in my mind, is like wearing my product manager hat, my head of product hat. That is identifying which customers you're going to serve with what services at what price point. You need to do those things before you decide to get into the marketplace. Like the marketplace isn't a magic money button. It's a hey, I have something people want, how do I get it to them faster button. Keep with the basics.
Right. And through the service that you offer, in your case, your service is then billed per usage, based on how much do they actually use your service, and how many messages and so forth.
Yeah, so we have a few different models. We have different tiers of our service. Our basic tier is a scale to 0 service. So if you're not sending and reading or storing data, then you pay nothing. Storing, you set your own retention, so that can be controlled. And it'll go to 100 megabytes a second. So you can spike from 0 to 100 and back down, and it's all honky-dory. It's all very easy. We do have other tiers of our product that'll go do gigabytes per second. Those will have some component of fixed cost, so we're not bleeding money. But they're also variable. So there's a fixed base with variable usage on top of it. So the majority of billing out of our services are usage based. And so that, use more, pay more, use less, pay less.
Yeah. So when that you have consumed your service a lot for a long time, and you see that this is a consistent thing, then you would consider upgrading to those higher tiers that gives you a lot of security, right? I mean, that this thing is not going to go down like ever, right?
Yeah, exactly. For us, our kind of product model is not to limit so much on scale as to limit so much on features. If I'm hosting my cat video site, I don't really need, advanced security features for it. I've never seen cat videos that require advanced security features.
Dog videos for you, Dan.
Yes, that's true. I'm deathly allergic to cats. So I shouldn't have said that on something being broadcast. Someone's going to come run and throw a hairball at me sometime. Then you step up into kind of security features, and not just security, but other types of features, which are kind of higher value add, because just producing consumer message isn't necessarily super high value. Yes, there's a ton of value to it being easy and available and stuff like that. But you step up through the product tiers. But anyone who's the way I've designed the product, and we have here collectively at Confluent, is that you should kick the tires on the thing that costs very little, and see if you like it, and then just upgrade it to if you want.
Yeah, and that's a wonderful thing about the cloud, because it's like democratized, right? You don't have to care how the thing actually works. You just want to use that service, and when you start, like you say, kicking the tires, it should be easy to get started. It should be cheap to scale to zero. If I don't use it a day, I'm not in the office, then it's not costing me anything at all. And then I come into the office and I do some work and I send some messages, probably small amounts. I'm just developing and testing things. And I'm just paying for an itty bitty little thing. When I'm a huge success, when I'm a raging success on the internet and everybody wants to buy my service, there's so many messages being sent. Well, then I can afford to pay you guys more. Right.
Well, yes. And actually, so the ideal model for us is you've put us in a place where we are supporting whatever makes you money, so that as that thing scales, we scale with you, and you don't even have to think about it. And if you are making less money, it scales down too. Because if we're not, if we're an increasing cost for you, disproportionate to the value you get from us, we're not going to be around long.
Right.
So we want to make sure we're valuable at any scale, and that we're helping you kind of achieve what you want. But the whole developer focus. Our company started obsessed with developers, perhaps too much sometimes. Look, a lot of our collateral is, if you're a technical member of this audience, a lot of our collateral is going to be right up your alley. But if our idea there, even still today, and part of why we like the marketplace so much, is any developer on an Azure platform can kick the tires and see what they think, and they don't have to make a big commitment. They don't have to go through all this rigmarole just to try things. And it's very different than, we're old enough to remember when getting software that you needed to do something took a year, and then you were stuck with it. And then it's like, hey, there's this amazing thing. If we just give some money, we can try it and see if it does what we want. Now I want people can try today. They could try for 20 minutes, decide they like this or don't, and move on and try something else. And that kind of it makes it a lot easier to try more tools and find what's the right tool for you. Which makes people more successful in the long run.
Yeah, definitely. Starting up a business today is definitely massively different compared to starting up a business, 15 years ago, like predate the cloud, right? Back then it would be like, we need to find an investor to buy some actual hardware and start putting it together, right? Installing an OS and things. We're not there anymore, are we?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. Now we literally, it could be two people in a garage and they can have, a globally deployed social media platform in a week or two.
And they could compete with the giants technically, because it's right there. So that's, I think, was a pretty golden piece of advice that you gave there. Let's pull that out again. You said that you need to consume these services in the platform, including yours, in such a way that when you make little money, it's the platform that you run on is going to cost you a little money as well. And when you make a lot of money, then, well, you can start paying more for the services that you use. So if you can build your business on a model like that, on a pay-per-use consumption basis, then you have it's a nice thing to build that on a cloud platform today with software as a service things, right?
Absolutely, and that's what's so different now. That's what makes it so easy to try different ideas and see what's going to have product market fit. Is that as you said it perfectly in the past, we had to the first 6 months was or year was
Yeah.
racking and stacking and installing and all this stuff and all that stuff. Today you could do that today, literally today. We could do it right now and be done before it's evening time, my time.
Yeah.
But if you model it in a way, if you build in a way, why serverless is so popular is because you can just pay when you're actually making money, basically, or providing service, I should say. Making money is a different challenge, which hopefully your monetization model aligns with your technology model. But
That'd be nice.
having those things scale like from a usage point rather than a fixed point, saying, hey, I have a floor, I have to fill a bucket, and then I'll buy another bucket and I'll fill that bucket. That's a lot more just work to keep filling the buckets versus something like a serverless model, which is just, hey, it just goes up, it goes down. Even if my unit cost is sometimes a little bit higher, my total cost is much lower because the variability is built into it.
Definitely. Perfect. All right. So we are coming up towards the end. It's been a very, very interesting hour to spend here with you, Dan. I know also you have to move on to your next appointment for the day. I appreciate you giving us some time here. I also see here in the background, we're not going to bring him on just yet, but we have the next speaker coming on. And so just as the final couple of minutes here, what is the next thing on the roadmap for you guys, for your product, for your service in Azure? What are we going to get? What is the next cool thing?
Yeah, I would keep an eye out on the portal, on the Azure portal for our product experience. That's going to get developed out a lot more and become much more a much cooler experience, a much more detailed experience than it is now. So we're really excited about that, and we're working.
One of your areas of investment right now. Mm-hmm. Anything new with the features? Any new any new tiers, or any new other features coming in?
Now I have to reflect that we're a publicly traded company, and it's a lot harder for me to be as open as I used to be. So
fair enough. Yeah. So I was just thinking if there's anything on your public roadmap that you can disclose, or share, that is already out there.
I would keep an eye out for about 2 or 3 more weeks, and there will be. Yeah.
2 or 3 more weeks. That's so exciting.